is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 263 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm talking to Dave Cohen all about how to write funny in your novel. First, a comment on Petra's episode, which was from Matt Goodall. What a fun, accessible, informative interview. This was a really useful look behind the scenes of running a Kickstarter. Super helpful, thank you. So, I have been in a very strange place. I think that because I have been running for so long without long-term plans, I have been really struggling to look forward to anything. So I stopped having kind of major plans when I knew that we were going to New Zealand. So back in, I would say, maybe March or April. And I feel like I've been in this very strange limbo, especially because of all like the business growth and having to put in new systems, bring people on board, outsource things. It has been a exercise in what I would say is living in the present, which is fine. Like, that's okay. But I really enjoy also projecting, like, okay, everybody drink. I have futuristic, but it's not super, super high. I think it's like 13, something like that. So I really enjoy being able to look into the future. I also have strategic. And so for me, it's really important that I have like an overarching plan or some kind of direction. And I feel like I have been living for a really long time with, okay, what's the next thing? Okay, what's the next thing? And in this kind of firefighting sort of framework, which is fine temporarily, but it does start to wear on you. And I think, so now that I'm getting towards the end of this third book in my vampire trilogy, and I think I'm probably a week away, I really, really, really hope that next time I do a podcast, I am saying to you, like it's either it's done or like I'm a day or two away from finishing. But anyway, now that I'm getting towards the end of this book, it is the very first time that I have not already started working on the next thing because I've been drowning in all this other stuff. So everybody hold on to your hats. I'm actually going to take some time off. I know, fucking wild, right? But I'm going to take a week or so off after I finish. And I say a week off. To me, this is a week off. You guys are just going to like roll your eyes at me. But I'm going to take a week off and I am going to do some reading and I'm going to, go for some walks, go to the gym, maybe go to a bookstore. But what I am going to do is also plan. And I'm really going to take some time to plan. I have never set goals that are numerical in the way that I think I'm going to set them next year. So I have some big plans for my Shopify, for what I want to achieve with Kickstarters, with bringing products into the business. And I'm really, really excited for the first time in a really long time. I don't think I felt like this in ages. And I don't know what it is about this last week. I don't know if it's because of where I've got to in the manuscript and I feel like the end is in sight. But all of a sudden I feel like I've had a weight lifted off my shoulders because I'm going into this period of being able to do some planning. And I get excited about the projects I've got on my schedule. And I just haven't been able to do that. I haven't been able to get excited about anything because I've been fucking firefighting one problem after the other or one major project after another without any space to breathe. And yes, I know, you're all going to roll your eyes and be like, well, we told you to rest. I know, bitches. I know, but I don't listen. I have to learn the hard way. Well, I have learnt my lesson. So, I guess I am doing the 2025 planning a bit early. So I would love to know, like, please tell me, like, do you guys have any goals for next year? Is it too early for you to start planning? What does your 2025 look like? I mean, it's probably a little bit early. We are only just like day 2 in the last quarter of this year. But yeah, I feel excited again for the first time. And we've got some great guests lined up for the show as well. And like, everything that's happened in the last week has really given me this burst of life. I had some dinner with friends as well. And like, yeah, I feel like I'm in a much better place than I have been in a really long time. And maybe it's because I'm getting towards the end of this bloody book, which I have to say has been the hardest book I've written in a really long time. This book has almost broken me. So most of you will know, and I've got another lesson as well about Kickstarter. Hopefully my brain will remind me. So this book, basically, I usually draft to completion and then I edit to completion. And I have not been able to do that with this book. So I have gone over the front end of this book. I don't even know how many times. I do know how many times, but I'm going to say, I don't want to say the amount of times because you guys will be like, that's not a lot of times. It is to me. Anyway, I've gone over the front end of this book. I can't even tell you. Too many times for me to be comfortable. And so I have been in this very weird revising, drafting type phase, which has made progress feel extraordinarily slow. You know, normally I'm smashing out like 5k days every day or more. And so the book gets done very, very quickly and I feel like I'm making progress. Whereas what's been happening is, you know, hacking out a few words here, couple of thousand words written, you know, sort of 4,000 words edited or something in a day, which, yes, I am aware that is very fast for some people. But for me, who's used to start and stop one phase of working on the book, as in the drafting, it has been painful. Really fucking painful. And so I think, oh God, you're all going to be laughing your heads off. I have to slow down and give myself some more time before I start drafting and have a slightly more comprehensive outline. And that doesn't necessarily mean like words. It doesn't necessarily mean that I need a really long outline. I just need to give my brain more thinking space. Thinking time. Oh, for fuck's sake. I'm like so annoyed at myself that I'm having to even have this conversation with myself live on the podcast. But here we are. The other thing that I have learned this week, look at me sharing all my lessons then, Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter's done fucking phenomenally. When this goes out, it will be over already. But one of the big differences that I think between this one and the first one I had a street team. And that was partly because I was launching the book at the same time. But I didn't have a street team this time. And I have found the middle to be much soggier than the first middle. And I think that's because I had challenges for the street team. And so we did bring in more people proportionately in the second one than we did the first one. So I think that's probably something that I have learnt, and it will be different going forward because I will have finished the whatever series that goes into the Kickstarter will be finished next time. So it won't be like I'm trying to dual launch a Kickstarter and promote a book launch. And actually having book 3 on pre-order sort of on all the stores has really confused people. And I think that confusion between the Kickstarter running and the book launching has caused a few problems. I'm seeing very marginally lower pre-order numbers on book 3. But also people are coming to me confused, like, oh, is it releasing early here? Blah, blah, blah. So that's like a big lesson learned for me. The next one I do will be the Girl Games series, which is already complete. So I will not need to worry about that so much, but I will be recruiting a street team to help me. And I think that will help, like, that malaise that I tend to feel in the middle of a Kickstarter. Everybody gets it because the Kickstarters generally like flop off. You can't maintain launch day sort of energy all the way through a Kickstarter. It's just impossible. And you work really hard to get all the pre-launch followers anyway, so that you do have a really big day. However, I think that I might work on that. The other thing that I might do for the next one is run some Facebook ads. Like, I'm not very confident with Facebook ads, so I might have to ask somebody for help for that. But I didn't do that this time either. This was all generated just by kind of the pre-marketing stuff. So yeah, and the other thing, one last thing, I really, really, really wanted to ship before Christmas. I really wanted to ship early November. And I think because I have had to slow down the drafting to make sure that the book is right, I may not be able to do that. So it may be that the books go in January, which is, I'm frustrated by that, but it is what it is. We're going to kill ourselves trying to do it. And apparently that's not my modus operandi anymore. So yeah, I think it really depends on when I finish the draft. But it might be me accepting that things have to take a little bit longer than I'm comfortable with. So yeah, slightly longer intro this week. I know my intros have been quite short recently, but I sort of feel like that's because of the headspace that I've been in. I've been really struggling. I've been struggling to kind of see the future, understand the plan. I've been, really bogged down in the kind of quagmire of growth and implementing like structures and systems and things. And I sort of feel like I'm on the up now, which is great, and I'm excited. So hopefully you guys can hear that in my voice too. Rebel of the week this week is Krista. Krista says, when COVID hit in the US in 2020, two major changes happened in my life. First, both my husband, then fiance, and I began working from home. Second, we moved out of our apartment and into our current one, which is cat friendly, meaning we were finally able to adopt a kitten. We named him Loki. He was a mischievous little gremlin who is always causing trouble because he wants love and attention. Because we both worked from home full time for more than a year after we adopted him, Loki got very used to pretty much anything he wanted whenever he wanted it. In early 2022, my job role changed, and I was suddenly going to have to spend a lot more time in meetings that required me to be on my camera. I found an online tri-fold partition that would fit in my space. I fully extended it. It was about 5 feet tall by about 6 feet wide, 2 inches thick, and the entirety of it was covered in a felt similar to an office cubicle wall. Loki was very much not a fan of the temporary wall. I soon realised that Loki was so upset at the new wall that he was repeatedly trying and failing to jump over it, smacking into it and falling into a hard landing on the floor. I set up the trifold again and waited and listened for like the thuds to see if Loki would try and jump the wall. But all was quiet this time. I joined my call for work and all was going smoothly when out of nowhere Loki appears on my desk. I looked behind me, but the trifold was still standing strong with no apparent gaps where he could have slipped through. I realised my clever boy had used his claws to scale the felt wall like a spider cat. Oh my god! And there was no keeping him out now. The trifold has since been retired, and I must now resort to bribing Loki into behaving with toys or an open window whenever I have an important call. But as much mischief as he brings into my life, he has brought infinitely more joy, and I wouldn't trade my little rebel for anything. Oh my god, what an adorable little kitty cat! I absolutely fucking love it. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, or if you would like your pet, your nan, your mum, your dad, your sibling, your cousin, whoever, to be a rebel, then please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. This episode is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life, Kobo's free, fast, and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and their team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help you reach new readers around the world. Right now, digital books are reaching more people than ever, and libraries are becoming an integral part of that. In 2021, top digital library systems powered by Overdrive loaned 500 million books, an increase of 16% on 2020. That's 500 million book loans, which means a lot of happy library readers. You can easily reach library readers through Kobo Writing Life. All you need to do is go to the rights and distribution section of your book, click yes to Overdrive and enter a library price. Your book will then be available to librarians to purchase for multi-loan use, but also for a one-time checkout option. Distributing with KWL means you're not paying any aggregator fee, and you'll earn 50% on every library sale. If you're interested in taking part in library promotions, email the KWL's dedicated author care team at writinglife@kobo.com, and they'll add you to their mailing list. And don't forget to tell your readers that they can now pick your book up in libraries. If you want to learn more about KWL, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, and find them on social. Create your free account today at kobo.com/writinglife. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Cohen. Dave is a multi-award-winning BBC comedy writer. He spent more than 4 decades as a leading light on the British comedy scene as a writer, performer, and podcaster. He's best known for his hugely popular song lyrics for the hit BBC show Horrible Histories, for which he won 8 BAFTA awards. When COVID hit, he turned to writing novels, publishing Stand Up Barry Goldman and Barry Goldman, The Wilderness Years in 2021 and 2023. The final book in the Barry trilogy will be out in November 25. Dave also works with new comedy writers to help them improve their craft. He teaches how to incorporate humour and overcome the fears and insecurities that hold people back from adding funny to their fiction. In 2022, he published the second edition of his popular and influential book, The Complete Comedy Writer, packed with advice about how to craft great comedy scripts for TV, radio, and the movies. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. I love a bit of comedy. I think it's so unique. Everybody has a little different flavour of what they like. So yeah, I'm really interested to talk about this because I think it's one of the topics that so many writers shy away from. But before we dive into that, would you like to tell me, I mean, I know I've read your bio, but like that doesn't really tell me who you are, you know, like let's get to who you are. What was your journey? How did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, that was a very, very thorough bio. I thought, oh, gosh, he sounds amazing.
As long as it was your bio.
Yeah. I must have a really good publicist or something. I don't know. But no, it's, I always wanted to write books, I suppose. Well, in fact, I think I wanted to write The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So, in fact, I wanted to write radio comedy, which is how I first discovered that. I give this kind of everything was kind of changed for me in the late 1970s in Britain when punk happened, and that changed everything in the sort of Britain that I was a teenager in, and it completely took me in, and really everything that has happened to me since then, I would say, has been kind of as a result of punk. And when punk happened, I wanted to become a punk rock star. I'd been playing folk music in folk clubs in the north of England and working men's comedy clubs, and punk came along, and that was just blew everything away. And so I moved fairly quickly from that into the world of stand-up comedy, which kind of developed pretty well out of that whole sort of punk scene. So this distracted me from my desire to write novels. You can imagine that actually, you know, being able to make a living doing 3 or 4 gigs a week for 20 minutes at a time is not the greatest sort of inspiration for being able to sit down and write novels. So I kind of left it for a bit. But then after I did stand-up, I got into TV and comedy writing, and I just kept putting off the novel writing. And then finally, actually, it was just before COVID that I started to think about, as I was approaching my 60th birthday, I thought, okay, if I don't start writing these novels now, I'm never going to do it, am I? I'm going to be one of those people who always said, oh yeah, I'd love to be a novelist. So I sort of got down to it, and then COVID happened and made me think, oh, I've got to do it even more. So here I am now, and now the thing that I did before I started doing novels as well, once I spent a lot of time writing TV and radio comedy, was I started to do a bit of teaching about writing comedy for TV and radio. And I noticed when I was writing the novels that there were no books at all there's millions of books out there how to write a novel, but there's nothing out there at all that says how to write a funny novel. So I kind of thought I'd better write it, really, as much to teach myself as anyone else. I
think that's such a truism. I've written some craft books, and I always end up writing the craft book that I really needed. And I think it's like that inner learner. I just write the thing that I really desperately want to learn about, because in teaching we learn, which is a wild thing to say. It seems very backwards, but I do think there is a truism there. Yeah. One of the other things that I loved that you said was mentioning The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's still, that whole quadrilogy or trilogy of 4 has such a big part of my heart because it was the first books I ever cried laughing reading. Like I was laughing so violently that I actually couldn't see the page because my face was filled with like laughter tears. And it's like that's never left me. I just think Douglas Adams was incredible.
Hmm.
Um, and so I suppose that's a good segue into talking about humor. Why do we need humor? Why do we need humor in fiction? Why is it important?
Well, I think, we need humor everywhere, really. And humor is just such an important aspect to all of our lives, I think. And it's specifically in books, but I guess as well in life, is that it kind of brings something to life. It brings light and shade and elements of reprieve. In fact, and in fact, Primo Levi, who wrote some of the most sort of harrowing books about the time that he spent in a concentration camp in the last years of when the Nazis were in Italy and Germany, and he wrote a book called Moments of Reprieve. So he wrote a book actually sort of saying there's even in the Holocaust, even in the I think he was in Auschwitz, but even in a concentration camp, there are funny moments, and he collected them in a book, and and it is it's so important, I think, that we have that we have light and shade in our books. I mean, that's the first reason. The second is a practical reason and a commercial one, really, I suppose. I mean, what would the Harry Potter books be without, say, sort of nearly headless Nick or Dobby the house elf? These characters that bring a color to those books. I mean, they would just be like, well, it would be like a magic realism book about a boy who does magic in a school. And I mean, yeah, but it so often in the Harry Potter books, right from the opening pages, it's the funny stuff that kind of draws us in, and it allows you to enjoy. In books like serious crime books or murder mysteries, murder is not a funny thing. Dying is not funny, but read a Richard Osman book, and the humor of the bunch of people who are themselves approaching death, solving murder mysteries, and him being a funny writer, that just makes those books irresistible to readers.
So, what do you think funny is? Like, there are so many different types of humor, and I just wonder, like, is there anything that's universally funny? Like, what is at the heart of humor? And I ask this because, so I'm super snarky, very sarcastic, love a dick joke, also really love a dad joke. Like, they will make me cry laughing. Whereas my wife is like, as dry as Jack D. And like, I find her hilarious, but I often have to translate if we're in public for other people. And I'm like, no, she was joking, as I'm like cackling. But like, yeah, what is humor? Is there something universal? Like, how do we know what is funny in order to put it in our work?
Yeah, I mean, I should make a distinction at this early point, I think, which is that especially when it comes to writing novels, there is a difference between writing something like Harry Potter, a murder mystery, romance, or whatever, where you're bringing humor, like I say, as a sort of light and shade to it. Then you do have books that are much more, they are what we would call comic fiction, books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which, although some people say, oh, that's science fiction, but mostly you would find that if there was a shelf that said comic fiction,
What
then
about
that
Terry
would be.
Pratchett? Is he in the same vein?
I in the book I've written about how to sort of how to funny up your fiction is the title, but Pratchett appears in the science fiction section. I've got a few sections where I talk about specific genres. So Terry Pratchett, I feel, works is he has created an entire universe, and Discworld is it is a science fiction world. But I think to bring that back to, well, what does make what are the things that are universally funny? I mean, you've kind of touched on it a little bit there. You mentioned dick jokes. I think bodily functions are just funny. Everybody finds them funny, as we discovered to our amazement and surprise when we were doing the Horrible Histories TV series. I mean, it just became a huge hit. It was like a kids' TV show. We weren't expecting anything of it.
My son is 11 in a couple of months, and any toilet humor is just like he will just, like be bent double laughing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm almost laughing at him laughing, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, we used to get the notes from Greg, the researcher on the show, Greg Jenner, who's now become a very successful history podcaster himself. And Greg's notes were always, I would sort of turn up to meetings about, kind of, we're going to talk about the Tudors today or whatever, and I'd be expecting some string of dates about, oh, Henry VIII did this, but then there was so much of it was about this was how this was how the hygiene was at the time or something. And in fact, actually, to go back to Terry Pratchett's question to anyone who wants to write science fiction or create a world is, the first question you ask as your starting point is, how does shit get in and how does it get out? And as soon as you start to ask that question, you can just build a world. And in fact, he based Discworld to some extent on 19th century Victorian London, which was when the River Thames was basically an open sewer, and that's you could practically walk across it. It was so filthy and disgusting, and that immediately tells you that takes you on a journey to make, wherever else you're describing, you've got this disgusting world that smells, and so there's funny smells, there's bodily functions, there's so that's a kind of that's a sort of fairly universal thing. I think, I'm not saying therefore you must make all your books about bodily functions, but I think the other thing that really matters, what makes comedy work generally, is self-awareness in you as a writer, awareness of your own flaws and the things that are, the things that you think and say that actually, you're fooling yourself most of the time. Because the best thing about a comedy character is they completely lack self-awareness. That's the key to a comedy character. And so it's very helpful for you to kind of look deep into your soul, and I'm not talking about dark sides or shadows or things. I'm talking more about what I call cringe corner. Just look back at some of the things you've done in your life and think, oh my God, did I really act like that on that date? Did I really say that to that person? Did I? And we tend to kind of dwell on these things, but actually we just need to forgive ourselves and just say, okay, that thing I did, I'm just going to give that to my next character, and that's going to be how I'm going to build the character based on their complete lack of self-awareness.
There's always that phrase, isn't there? Like, if you can't laugh at yourself, what can you laugh at, or something? And I think that's so true. I think there's a really fine line between taking the piss out of yourself and being self-deprecating. Because we can use deprecation as a kind of coping mechanism, but actually, I don't know, I don't want to go too woo-woo and into stuff, but it can alter your mindset, I suppose. So I do think there's a really fine line, but there's nothing I love more than taking the piss out of myself because I'm completely ridiculous. So
well, self-deprecation, I was going to say that was actually my main shtick as a stand-up comedian was, and it's a very strong thing running through a lot of Jewish humor anyway. Jews are used to being kind of moving around, being kicked out of a country for whatever reasons, mostly racist ones. So we've kind of developed a sort of way of dealing with that is by saying, yeah, you're right, look at me. I really am like that, but I'm not really. I'm just laughing at myself. And that's interesting as well, because you can always tell when you're a stand-up comedian when an audience is laughing. Are they laughing with you or are they laughing at you? And I think that's a distinction which you kind of it was always easy for me to see. If I did a joke and I felt the audience was laughing at me rather than with me, I just dropped that joke straight away.
Yeah, I think, and that's quite a good segue as well, because I think it's much easier to determine that when you can feel the energetic kind of level in a room and see people's expressions, but you can't do that in a book. So let's talk about fiction. What do you think are like the principles of writing funny fiction? Like, talk to listeners, like, what are the basics they need to know?
The basics are the same basics as for 95% of anything else that you want to write. You're going to write, the Greek, Aristotle wrote about this, your character, a character is in a normal place, something happens to them, they go on a journey. On the journey, they have to fight these battles. They get to a point about 3/4 of the way of the journey where all is lost, and then they get through that. They slay the dragon. They do whatever they have to do. They find true love. So they get through, and they emerge triumphant. And there's no difference, in comedy to anything else. The main difference, though, there is when it comes to the character. And the word that Aristotle used when he talks about, kind of characters going on a journey, they get to the end of the journey and they've learnt something. And that word is catharsis. It's like something has happened to them and they have grown and become wiser. In comedy, they don't grow. They don't become wiser. They learn nothing. And I mean, in a sense, that's why sitcom form became so popular, because a sitcom is about a character who comes back every week and makes the same mistake every week, just like we do in real life. So obviously in a novel which has to end, there is triumph and there is victory, but not necessarily self-knowledge. And so the other thing about character is, again, when you read any book about writing and how you develop your story and things, you've always got your main character, the protagonist, and then you've got the character, the antagonist, the character that they are against. More often than not, in comedy, it's the same person. So the antagonist is the same person as the character. So like in books, say like the Adrian Mole books by Sue Townsend, which are very huge, 8 books in total, universally popular. But the main character is this guy, this wimpy character, Adrian Mole, who's a sort of slightly wet political character, but he's basically a vehicle for Sue Townsend to write sort of brilliant satires about Britain through the late 20th century. But that his enemy throughout really is the guy he's looking at in the mirror. He can't escape that sort of nerdiness. And that's the same really for the best. I think the best comedy characters is the biggest enemy is staring back at them in the mirror.
Interesting. So how do we turn that into humor on the page? How do we have so we've got the protagonist becomes their own antagonist, but how does that then translate into on-page humor?
Yeah, so it's I suppose it's what you're the important thing about this character is that isn't that they're funny, but it's that it's that they're kind of almost really sort of serious about who they are. It's like your character has to believe they are the thing that they're not. So always with so much of the best writing, I think, and it's the same across everything. Writing for TV, radio, sitcoms, novels, serious novels, funny novels. It's all about the character, the main character, and how that character acts in the world. And every character has goals and they have obstacles. And it's just in the case of the comic character, their goals are goals that we can see that they're not going to get because there's a flaw in their character that they haven't spotted. So it's about being able to really work on your characters, work out what are their goals. And it's not just, I want to find love or I want to be successful. You have to be kind of quite specific about it, really. It's so many, the best romantic novels, I think, romantic comedy novels, are novels that have these characters who have a lack of self-awareness, and that they sort of gradually, the self-awareness kind of they become aware, but the way that they become aware is because the way that they've acted. So they have to put things into motion. They have to be proactive. They have to do things, and these things are going to get them into trouble, and then they're going to get into more trouble, and they just keep getting more and more into trouble. So it's about, in the same way as, say, if you're writing like a thriller or something, so your character's got that the obstacle has been put in the way by the criminal mastermind character, and they have to get round it. But it's just in this case, the criminal mastermind is the same person.
Okay, so I guess the way I'm processing what you're saying is it's almost like they have to have some kind of juxtaposition inside them, or kind of like some kind of opposites attract type thing, where the contrast between the very deadly serious grumpy character and the sort of light sunshine character creates friction, which is then humorous. Is that kind of, am I kind of understanding?
Yeah, I think, and it's
Almost like Spock and Captain Kirk, right? There's like humor because they're so different, because they're two sides but they're also two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, well, that's a great example, and that's a way that you can bring comedy in to what you're writing, is to have like it's not just a main character, but maybe you've got two main characters, and so you've got the sort of the classic mismatched couple, which is a very sort of familiar comic idea. And in
like
fact, it's
Watson and Holmes as well.
Watson and Holmes is a great example of that. And what it is that each one has got something that the other doesn't have, and each can be looked at. Spock will look at Kirk and just say, "Oh, man, what is he doing here?" I know from my perfectly logical brain that if he does that instinctive thing, that's just going to be disaster. And it's like, oh, it's not. Oh, he's done that. Meanwhile, Kirk's going, yes, I know I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that, but if I just go like this and press this button, and oh God, Spock was right. So there is humor there. And Holmes and Watson, there's a recent British TV series of that, done by Stephen Moffat, who's a great comedy writer. So he really played up the comic difference between them. But even in the original books, the Sherlock Holmes books, you do have this. Holmes is very much a sort of he's a little bit pompous in the way that he teaches Watson, and Watson is, oh my goodness, Holmes, I could never have guessed that. But in the meantime, Holmes is a complete, nobody likes him. Watson is the sort of gateway to Holmes, I suppose.
I want to pick up on something you said there about Holmes being pompous. Do you think, well, so actually, let me rephrase that. Some of the funniest characters I can think of are almost very, very extreme that they border caricature about some kind of personality trait. So, talking about like the pompousness of Holmes, do you think that we do have to kind of pick one trait or personality element and just take it to that extreme? Are we ever in danger of creating caricatures that feel 2D by doing that? Or are there like tools and techniques for keeping the funny, but keep also creating characters that feel 3D, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very, very good question. It's something that I've really had to think a lot about, switching as I have from the world of sitcom writing, where you've got 22 minutes to tell a story, and if they're about a sitcom script is maybe 4,000 or 5,000 words, then suddenly you've got 80,000 words, and it's like, it's not enough to just say, "Oh, he's pompous, he's an idiot, or he's the biggest idiot." You've got, you've also, and you've got the inner dialogue as well for that character, and so as soon as you have an inner dialogue, you're already kind of bringing in sort of light and shade. But I think it helps to start from that extreme point of view. And why, so many of the kind of best comedies and not just comedies but dramas as well, like a sort of a detective dramas is it's such a cliche now, but it's still true, isn't it? It's like this character is the maverick. They do it their way. It's like you say, well, Kirk, so and then this other character plays by the rules, so that's as soon as you set up those two things, you can have, like we've already mentioned Holmes and Watson there, PG Wodehouse, who I have sort of returned to write this book, and was just, on the one hand just so delighted and loving every second of it, on the other hand sections of the language and some of the characters are sort of like, oh dear, but there's no malice in PG Wodehouse, but but there's these two characters. There's this sort of posh idiot, whether it's Worcester or Lord Elmfield or something, and then there's this sort of there's the kind of the Jeeves is butler, or Beach the butler in the Blandings books, and they are, that contrast. Yeah, you have to avoid the danger of just making them caricatures by just rounding them a bit, but they still can be those two extremes, I think.
So let's go a little bit deeper into that. Where is the line between appropriate jokes and just sounding like a bigot? Like, there's one particular comedian that I can think of, who I can't stand because I don't think their jokes are funny. But my wife...
name names.
No, I can't. Maybe I'll tell you after. But my wife thinks this person's hilarious. I'll give you a clue. They've got a very infamous laugh. Let me put it that way. And so, but my wife thinks this person's hilariously funny. So I'm just curious, like, where is that line in humor? Because I think in this day and age, in this kind of woke culture, people are much less tolerant of anything. And certainly, I think some kind of British humor can be a little bit close to the bone occasionally. So where is that line with appropriate humor and inappropriate humor?
Yes, it's changed. I can say certainly. I mean, I would say things. I'll say things now that probably I wouldn't have said 10 years ago, and I might not even have said 5 years ago. You don't. It's hard to know, actually, until it happens. And in fact, I was writing songs for Horrible Histories as recently as 2008 that have got lines in them that I wouldn't write now. And for instance, there was a song I did about the 4 King Georges, and that my first thought, it was the first song I wrote for the whole series, actually. My first thought, let's do the four King Georges. Oh, it's a boy band, and that the song just came naturally as a result of that. Therefore, each King George in Britain is a different type of boy band guy, and so there was one. I was the mad one, and yeah, everyone knows King George III was called mad, and George IV was everybody knows he was a sort of a big glutton, and so they had the mad one and the fat one, and in 2008 I could write that without thinking that I was doing anything particularly controversial. But I think now I wouldn't write that. I just think that people's attitudes change. And I think that I talked earlier about being a stand-up comedian, and the whole development of our sort of alternative comedy was it was considered to be not sexist and not racist, and that was the crucial difference between our comedy and the comedy that had gone before. That didn't mean, we must therefore do politically correct jokes, but it did mean that some people then rebelled against us being so sort of right on, and so it goes in cycles.
Yeah, so for me, like there are and I'm not sure we're using the phrase own voices anymore, but hopefully you know what I mean when I say that. Like if somebody has lived experience, I don't mind them doing the self-depreciation thing, because that feels like they're sharing an in-joke, right? So as a queer woman, Jen Brister, I think it's no, maybe I've got that. Is it Jen Brister?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. She's hilarious, and she's a queer woman, and I've been to see her, and like she makes loads of gay jokes, and it's fucking hilarious because we're all sharing in that community. But if there was sort of a straight white middle class man poking fun at the gay community, I wouldn't be laughing so much,
Absolutely.
But yeah, like I think that's one of the things for me, like, and why I love self-depreciation so much. Like Lee Evans and Michael McIntyre are two of my favorite comedians because they're absolutely ludicrous, and they're so fit. Like their humor is a physical humor as well. Like they use their body and just take that they exaggerate every part. I'm smiling even thinking about them on stage. Like I really hope I get to see Michael McIntyre in concert at some point. But anyway, okay, what common mistakes do you see newer writers making when they try to put humor in their books?
Well, just before we get to that, I'll just finish your thought there, which is because it is quite pertinent to when you're writing, if you want to write funny. And the lived experience thing is really important because I've been involved for many years in sort of various peace activist groups within the Jewish community with regard to Israel. But I come across a lot of people now who are just finding out about Israel and Palestine and are saying, "Oh, I know the answer to this," and I sort of think, well, yeah, an answer to it, but I've got I've spent 50 years here and I don't know the answer. So
my grandmother lives in Jerusalem and she doesn't know the answer either.
Well,
like.
Yeah, and that there's a thousand different things that you can be. I know when you say she lives in Jerusalem, that could mean she's Palestinian or Christian or Jewish or any number of things. But
she's very Jewish.
Oh, right, okay.
Very, very Jewish.
Right. But there's a book there's a very interesting book which I read, which is where if you want to write about something that is controversial, it really it is, even if you do that, you can be really pushing the barriers within your own group. And this book, The Sellout by Paul Beatty, which won the Booker Prize about 10 years ago, it's a hilarious book, but there are a lot of triggers in there. I mean, one of the things that this guy does, he's a black writer, and he writes this story about how he sort of almost accidentally becomes a slave owner. This is in modern day America, just at the end of the Obama presidency, and he reintroduces school segregation as well. And so there's, I mean, it's, it really.
Oh my goodness me! What was the title of that? That sounds like an incredible.
It's called The Sellout. The Sellout by Paul Beatty.
Okay.
And there's very liberal use of the N word, if I'm allowed to say the word liberal close to that. But I mean, it's and it did divide. A lot of people felt, a lot of black people felt this book should not have been written. But it is actually a really, really powerful book, and it's a really.
Is it social commentary? Was he trying to make a point?
Oh, very much so.
Well,
I think, but
okay.
But I mean, as someone, a critic pointed out, said the problem with this book is that racists could find it funny, and that's something that you kind of have to. You have to factor that in a little bit if you're thinking about, I want to write about, and I want to write about this thing in a funny way, or I want to write about, and some of his observations are extraordinary, really, I think, and they are worth listening to, I think. But then also he's a very funny writer as well. So so it is difficult. It's a hard thing to talk about. Sorry, you did ask me a question which I've completely forgotten now.
Don't worry. I think, well, this is a far more interesting conversation anyway, but okay. I think the question was about new writers and what potential mistakes you see people making when they first approach comedy.
Yeah. Okay. I think I think that thing about make your character serious. That's definitely a thing that people do too much. They think, I want to write a funny book. I've got a funny character. Oh, look, he's just fallen over. Oh, look, he's a complete racist. And isn't it funny to do this? You have to. That character has to be serious. I think of someone like, say, Emma in the Jane Austen book. Emma is really, she knows what she's good at. She's good at bringing together people, and it's all written in that from Emma's point of view. And it's it takes the whole novel for her to realize that actually the thing she thought she was brilliant at, she's really crap at, and she's missed the most obvious thing staring her in the face. But the people are absolutely serious. And then to come back to what I've been saying really so far is, kind of don't stray too far from storytelling. Remember, this is the same as every other story. It's a story. It's got beginning, middle, and end. Things happen to your main character. Your main character tries things, they don't work, and don't stray too far away from the basics.
Okay. In one of your books, you have a section called Activate, Escalate, and Resolve. What is it? How can it help us with our comedy?
Right. It's about, that section is about plotting and structuring your plots. And I know there's this, I never knew this phrase until I got into novel writing, which was this thing about plotters versus pantsers, people who sit there and work out intricately what's going to happen versus people who just sit down and go, all right, chapter 1, blah, 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 blah. And I was amazed by it, really, because you can't really write a comedy. You can't write a sitcom episode, for instance, without structure, because sitcom episodes are 22 minutes long. If you're lucky, BBC, 26 minutes, 27 minutes. You've got, things have to happen at very specific times. You really do need to think about structure. And it's kind of really the 3-act structure as defined by Aristotle. All I'm doing is what every writing book does, is saying, you thought Aristotle's 3-act structure is what it's all about. No, look at me. I've got this brand new way of talking about it, which is activate, escalate, resolve, which, as you've probably noticed, is 3 Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, basically. So yeah, activate is how you sort of start your story.
Do you think this applies? No, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm like, do you think this applies to like the structure of a joke as well? Or not necessarily a joke, but like a comedic scene almost? Because a lot of comedy is about that escalation and it just gets more and more and more silly or ludicrous or, so yeah, do you think it applies to that as well?
Yeah, yes, I do. It applies to an 80,000 word novel. It applies to an hour and a half movie. It applies to like a 10-word joke. There's this is very old school 1950s Jewish comedian who used to do these. They always used to do their jokes about their nagging wives and things. And there was this guy called Henny Youngman who had a famous 4-word joke, which was "Take my wife, please." Ha ha ha! How we all laughed at that. But ignoring the sexist nature of the joke, just to appreciate from a scientific point of view how someone can make a 3-act joke from 4 words, which is so activate is take my wife, and then escalate and resolve happen in acts 2 and act 3 happen in that word please. Haha. It's like he's escalating the thing about it's a play on the word, obviously. It's like, I'm not just saying here's an example, my wife. I'm saying I want my wife to go. I want you to take her away from me. That's an escalation, and it's also the resolution of take my wife. So yeah, it's a 3. There is a beauty to that, I'm afraid. That is the basic 3-act structure, but the escalation, and again, it's the same in you go to see Mission Impossible 25 or whatever, Fast and Furious 963. It's the same thing. You've got 10 minutes of the normal world, bang, activation, and then you've got like an hour to fill to build that story to that point where all is lost. And that you can't just have, a bad thing happened, I'll try this. That's no good, I'll have to try this. It's like, a bad thing happened, I'll try this. Oh no, I've made it worse, I'll try this. Oh no, that's made it even worse. Oh no, now I'll try this. Now it's even worse. So it has to get exponentially worse, and you have to get to a point where that's it. In the romantic comedy, it's the point where this couple are never, ever, ever going to get together in a million years. In your thriller, it's like, haha, the evil mustachio twirling villain is about to destroy the world. So that's when you have to get to resolve, and that's how you get back to your character resolving it in a comedy, resolving it with using their flaw, whatever their flaw is. But it has to be a character-driven thing. I mean, that's one of the big problems I find in comedy, but I find it everywhere, is when people get to that, as far as that end of Act 2 point, and it's like, oh God, all is lost, and I don't know. The writer, don't know how to resolve it, and they bring in some new thing. It's like a kind of, here's this extra character who's going to help save it, and readers just see through that. It has to be something that's you've planted earlier about the character. I mean, this is why it's so hard, because it's not easy to do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to tell me a rebel story in a minute, but one of the things kind of in your career is that being a rebel or having a rebel mindset has helped you. So before I ask you for a rebel story, can you talk to me a little bit about that? How has being a rebel helped your career?
Well, actually, I'm afraid I'm going to give probably the opposite answer to the one that you would like to hear, because this has been a fairly recent realization for me, is that I've been thinking, you know what, all those years that I thought of myself as a rebel, actually I was wrong. I was doing it all wrong. And the thing that completely changed my viewpoint was the documentary about the Beatles, Get Back. And, I had spent my entire life, I grew up listening to the Beatles. They were when I was 5-6 years old, they were the soundtrack of my childhood. And then as I became a teenager, and became like, they split up, and John Lennon was my hero, and Lennon stayed the hero, and Paul McCartney was just the sort of, he's just plinky plonky. He makes these silly little tunes, and John's the real hero. And, I carried on with this view all through my life, thinking I'm John Lennon, I'm not Paul McCartney. And then I watched this Get Back thing, and it was just, it made me realize what Paul McCartney was, which was, he was the glue. He was he was the guy. He turned up every day and worked really hard. So, or the other three did what they did, and he did what he did, but then he took it all and he turned it into something extraordinary. And then you listen to the next 40 years of stuff that he's made, and he's just an extraordinary guy. He's just going out, he's writing something, he's turning up for work. This whole thing in the whole Get Back documentary, which is kind of chronicling the split of the Beatles, so it's a sort of fairly traumatic time. And he, John's out of his head on heroin and whatever, and George is really fed up, and Ringo's just Ringo. But there's these sort of they're having these sort of big management problems and battles, and all this stuff's going on. But every morning, 8 o'clock, an hour before the others turn up, Paul McCartney turns up, sits at the piano, and tries writing new stuff. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I should have been doing all my life. Instead, I just thought, hey, look at me, I'm the rebel. So sorry about that. I'm not a rebel anymore.
Okay, well, this is the Rebel Author podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
Well, coming on this show under false pretenses is possibly one of those, but actually...
That's definitely a rebellion.
I did, one thing that I did do as a little bit rebellious, really, was in all the sort of years that I was a comedy writer. And one of the great things about being a writer is, you just don't have to turn up in a suit and tie every morning. But gradually I started, especially when I was working in offices, writing with other people. And, writers were always the scruffiest people in the room because, we're just not used to going out and having to look presentable. And I started almost sort of accidentally if I had an office day to work on a show or something, I would go in, not in suit and tie, but I would make a bit of an effort. So I'd always go in and I would always be the best dressed writer in the room. That was me rebelling against, I can just turn out. And I sort of still do that now every day. When I go to my desk in the morning, I try to I don't just go because I'm going to go for a run or something, and an hour later but I'll still turn up to my desk in my civvies, and then I'll go and get changed later. So it's just that and I feel myself rebelling by doing that.
I think there's a lot of psychology and mindset stuff around there, because it would be so easy for me to just come to work in my PJs every day and never bother getting dressed. But I do think there's a certain professionalism that comes with, okay, I'm wearing a hoodie, but I'm still dressed in proper clothes,
Yeah.
For a while, I actually created uniform because I got when running your own business, you often have to, well, not often, you always have to make all of the decisions. So I went through a lot of decision fatigue and was like, I'm done. Like, I can remove easy things. And so I just wore the same shirt. I mean, not the same one. I had 7 versions of the same top, but you know what I mean? Like, I wore the same thing every day. And I loved doing that for a while. And that made me feel even more businesslike because I was in branded uniform. Anyway, amazing. Thank you for your time. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, and anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, okay. So, how to funny up your fiction and bring light, shade, and laughs to your novels. That's coming out soon and be out very soon, available from all good computers. And you can read all about me and read my blog, sign up to my newsletter, whatever, at davecohen.org.uk.
Do you
That's
have
where
a
I live.
release date for it?
Do I have what, sorry?
A release date?
Sorry,
A release date for the...
sorry, a release date. I'm sorry. Yes, it's out on the 26th of September.
Lovely. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you. And of course, a giant thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to Dave Cohen, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm joined by Tiffany Yates Martin, and we have an amazing chat. I love Tiffany. I've spoken to her a number of times on the podcast, and we talk all about growing a sustainable, happier writing career. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.